Thomism is the philosophical school that arose as a legacy of the work and thought of Saint Thomas Aquinas, philosopher, theologian, and doctor of the Church. In philosophy, his disputed questions and commentaries on Aristotle are perhaps his most well-known works. In theology, his Summa Theologica is one of the most influential documents in medieval theology and continues to be the central point of reference for the philosophy and theology of the Catholic Church. In the encyclical Doctoris Angelici, Pope Pius X cautioned that the teachings of the Church cannot be understood without the basic philosophical underpinnings of Thomas' major theses. The capital theses in the philosophy of Saint Thomas are not to be placed in the category of opinions capable of being debated one way or another, but are to be considered as the foundations upon which the whole science of natural and divine things is based. If such principles are once removed, or in any way impaired, it must necessarily follow that students of the sacred sciences will ultimately fail to perceive so much as the meaning of the words in which the dogmas of divine revelation are proposed by the magistracy of the Church. The Second Vatican Council described Thomas's system as the perennial philosophy. Thomistic philosophy. General. Saint Thomas Aquinas believed that truth is to be accepted no matter where it is found. His doctrines draw from Greek, Roman, Jewish, and Muslim philosophers. Specifically, he was a realist. He largely followed Aristotelian terminology and metaphysics, and wrote comprehensive commentaries on Aristotle, often affirming Aristotle's views with independent arguments. Thomas respectfully referred to Aristotle simply as the philosopher. Quote, he also adhered to some Neoplatonic principles. For example, that it is absolutely true that there is first something which is essentially being and essentially good, which we call God. Everything can be called good and a being inasmuch as it participates in it by way of a certain assimilation. Shortly before Thomas died, his friend Reginald of Piperno implored him to finish his works. Thomas replied, I cannot, because all that I have written seems like straw to me. 24 Thomistic Theses. With the decree postquam sanctissimos of the 27th of July 1914, Pope St. Pius X declared that 24 theses formulated by teachers from various institutions clearly contain the principles and more important thoughts of Thomas. Principal contributors to the Church's official statement of the 24 Theses of Thomism include Dominican philosopher and theologian Edouard Hugon, of the Pontifical University of St. Thomas Aquinas, Angelicum and Jesuit philosopher theologian Guido Mattiusi of the Pontifical Gregorian University. Ontology. Potency and act divide being in such a way that whatever is either pure act, or of necessity it is composed of potency and act as primary and intrinsic principles. Since act is perfection, it is not limited except through potency, which itself is a capacity for perfection. Hence, in any order in which an act is pure act, it will only exist in that order as a unique and unlimited act. But whenever it is finite and manifold, it has entered into a true composition with potency. Consequently, the one God, unique and simple, alone subsists in absolute being. All other things that participate in being have a nature whereby the being is restricted. They are constituted of essence and being, as really distinct principles. A thing is called a being because of esse. God and creature are not called beings univocally, nor wholly equivocally, but analogically, by an analogy both of attribution and of proportionality. In every creature there is also a real composition of the subsisting subject and divided secondary forms, i.e. accidental forms. Such composition cannot be understood unless being is really received in an essence distinct from it. Besides the absolute accidents, there is also the relative accident relation. Although by reason of its own character relation does not signify anything inhering in another, it nevertheless often has a cause in things, and hence a real entity distinct from the subject. A spiritual creature is wholly simple in its essence, yet there is still a twofold composition in the spiritual creature, namely, that of the essence with being, and that of the substance with accidents. However, the corporeal creature is composed of act and potency even in its very essence. These act and potency in the order of essence are designated by the names form and matter respectively. Cosmology, neither the matter nor the form have being of themselves, nor are they produced or corrupted of themselves, nor are they included in any category otherwise than reductively as substantial principles. Although extension in quantitative parts follows upon a corporeal nature, nevertheless it is not the same for a body to be a substance and for it to be quantified. For of itself substance is indivisible, not indeed as a point is indivisible, but as that which falls outside the order of dimensions is indivisible. But quantity, which gives the substance extension, really differs from the substance and is truly an accident. The principle of individuation, i.e. of numerical distinction of one individual from another with the same specific nature, is matter designated by quantity. Thus in pure spirits there cannot be more than one individual in the same specific nature. By virtue of a body's quantity itself, the body is circumscriptively in a place, and in one place alone circumscriptively, no matter what power might be brought to bear. Bodies are divided into two groups, for some are living and others are devoid of life. In the case of the living things, in order that there be in the same subject an essentially moving part and an essentially moved part, the substantial form, which is designated by the name soul, requires an organic disposition, i.e. heterogeneous parts. Psychology, souls in the vegetative and sensitive orders cannot subsist of themselves, nor are they produced of themselves. Rather, they are no more than principles whereby the living thing exists and lives, and since they are wholly dependent upon matter, they are incidentally corrupted through the corruption of the composite. On the other hand, the human soul subsists of itself. When it can be infused into a sufficiently disposed subject, it is created by God. By its very nature, it is incorruptible and immortal. This rational soul is united to the body in such a manner that it is the only substantial form of the body. By virtue of his soul, a man is a man, an animal, a living thing, a body of substance and a being. Therefore, the soul gives man every essential degree of perfection. Moreover, it gives the body a share in the act of being whereby it itself exists. For the human soul there naturally issue forth powers pertaining to two orders, the organic and the non-organic. The organic powers, among which are the senses, have the composite as the subject. The non-organic powers have the soul alone as the subject. Hence, the intellect is a power intrinsically independent of any bodily organ. Intellectuality necessarily follows upon immateriality, and furthermore in such manner that the further the distance from matter, the higher the degree of intellectuality. Any being is the adequate object of understanding in general, but in the present state of union of soul and body, quantities abstracted from the material conditions of individuality are the proper object of the human intellect. Therefore, we receive knowledge from sensible things. But since sensible things are not actually intelligible, in addition to the intellect, which formally understands, an active power must be acknowledged in the soul, which power abstracts intelligible likeness or species from sense images in the imagination. Through these intelligible likenesses or species we directly know universals, i.e. i.e. the natures of things. We attain to singulars by our senses, and also by our intellect, when it beholds the sense images. But we ascend to knowledge of spiritual things by analogy. The will does not precede the intellect but follows upon it. The will necessarily desires that which is presented to it as a good in every respect satisfying the appetite, but it freely chooses among the many goods that are presented to it as desirable according to a changeable judgment or evaluation. Consequently, the choice follows the final practical judgment, but the will is the cause of it being the final one. God we do not perceive by an immediate intuition that God exists, nor do we prove it a priori, but we do prove it a posteriori, i.e. from the things that have been created, following an argument from the effects to the cause, namely, from things which are moved and cannot be the adequate source of their motion, to a first unmoved mover, from the production of the things in this world by causes subordinated to one another, to a first uncaused cause, from corruptible things which equally might be and not be, to an absolutely necessary being, from things which more or less are, live, and understand, according to degrees of being, living and understanding, to that which is maximally understanding, maximally living and maximally a being, finally, from the order of all things, to a separated intellect which has ordered and organized things, and directs them to their end. The metaphysical motion of the divine essence is correctly expressed by saying that it is identified with the exercised actuality of its own being, or that it is subsistent being itself. And this is the reason for its infinite and unlimited perfection. By reason of the very purity of his being, God is distinguished from all finite beings. Hence it follows, in the first place, that the world could only have come from God by creation. Secondly, that not even by way of a miracle can any finite nature be given creative power, which of itself directly attains the very being of any being. And finally, that no created agent can in any way influence the being of any effect unless it has itself been moved by the first cause. Metaphysics. Thomas says that the fundamental axioms of ontology of the principle of non-contradiction and the principle of causality. Therefore, any being that it does not contradict these two laws could theoretically exist, even if said being were incorporeal. Predication. Thomas noted three forms of descriptive language when predicating: univocal, analogical, and equivocal. Univocality is the use of a descriptor in the same sense when applied to two objects or groups of objects. For instance, when the word milk is applied both to milk produced by cows and by any other female mammal. Analogy occurs when a descriptor changes some but not all of its meaning. For example, the word healthy is analogical in that it applies both to a healthy person or animal and to some food or drink. Equivocation is the complete change in meaning of the descriptor and is an informal fallacy. For example, when the word bank is applied to river banks and financial banks. Modern philosophers talk of ambiguity. Further, the usage of definition that Thomas gives is the genus of the being, plus a difference that sets it apart from the genus itself. For instance, the Aristotelian definition of man, rational animal, its genus being animal, and what sets apart man from other animals is his rationality. Being existence is twofold. One is essential existence of the substantial existence of a thing, for example man exists, and this is existence simpliciter. The other is accidental existence, for example man is white, and this is existence secundum quid. In Thomist philosophy, the definition of a being is that which is composed of two parts, which refers to its quiddity, and refers to its esse. Quiddity is synonymous with essence, form and nature, whereas esse refers to the principle of the being's existence. In other words, a being is an essence that exists. Being is divided in two ways: that which is in itself, and that which is in another. Substances are things which exist per se or in their own right. Accidents are qualities that apply to other things, such as shape or color. Precedents must include in the definition a subject which is outside the genus, because they only exist in other things. Thomas holds that metaphysics is primarily the study of substances, as they are the primary mode of being. The Catholic Encyclopedia pinpoints Thomas's definition of quiddity as that which is expressed by its definition. The quiddity form of a thing is what makes the object what it is. The form, which is the actuality of matter. Matter becomes something actual and something individual, and also, the form causes matter to be. Thus, it consists of two parts, prime matter and substantial form, which is what causes a substance to have its characteristics. For instance, an animal can be said to be a being whose matter is its body, and whose soul is its substantial form. Together, these consist of its quiddity, essence. All real things have the transcendental properties of being, oneness, truth, goodness, etc. Causality. Aristotle categorized causality into four subsets in the Metaphysics, which is an integral part of Thomism. In one sense, the term cause means that from which, as something intrinsic, a thing comes to be, as the bronze of a statue and the silver of a goblet, and the genera of these. In another sense it means the form and pattern of a thing, i.e., the intelligible expression of the quiddity and its genera and the parts which are included in the intelligible expression. Again, that from which the first beginning of change or of rest comes is a cause. For example, an advisor is a cause, and a father is the cause of a child, and in general a maker is a cause of the thing made, and a changer a cause of the thing changed. Further, a thing is a cause inasmuch as it is an end, i.e., that for the sake of which something is done. For example, health is the cause of walking. For if we are asked why someone took a walk, we answer, in order to be healthy, and in saying this we think we have given the cause. And whatever occurs on the way to the end under the motion of something else is also a cause. For example, reducing, purging, drugs and instruments are causes of health, for all of these exist for the sake of the end, although they differ from each other inasmuch as some are instruments and others are processes. Refers to the material cause, what a being's matter consists of. Refers to the formal cause, what a being's essence is. Refers to the efficient cause, what brings about the beginning of or change to a being. Refers to the final cause, what a being's purpose is. Unlike many ancient Greeks who thought that an infinite regress of causality is possible, Thomas argues that an infinite chain never accomplishes its objective and is thus impossible. Hence, a first cause is necessarily for the existence of anything to be possible. Further, the first cause must continuously be in action, otherwise the series collapses. The philosopher says that to suppose a thing to be indefinite is to deny that it is good. But the good is that which has the nature of an end. Therefore it is contrary to the nature of an end to proceed indefinitely. Therefore it is necessarily to fix one last end. Thus, both Aristotle and Thomas conclude that there must be an uncaused primary mover, because an infinite regress is impossible. However, the first cause does not necessarily have to be temporally the first. Thus, the question of whether or not the universe can be imagined as eternal was fiercely debated in the Middle Ages. The University of Paris's condemnation of 1270 denounced the belief that the world is eternal. Thomas's intellectual rival, Street Bonaventure, held that the temporality of the universe is demonstrable by reason. Thomas's position was that the temporality of the world is an article of faith, and not demonstrable by reason, though one could reasonably conclude either that the universe is temporal or eternal. Goodness as per the Nicomachean Ethics of Aristotle. Thomas defines the good as what all things strive for, e.g., a cutting knife is said to be good if it is effective at its function, cutting. As all things have a function, final cause, all real things are good. Consequently, evil is nothing but privatio boni, or lack of good, as St. Augustine of Hippo defined it. Dionysius says, evil is neither a being nor a good. I answer that, one opposite is known through the other, as darkness is known through light. Hence also what evil is must be known from the nature of good. Now, we have said above that good is everything appetible, and thus, since every nature desires its own being and its own perfection, it must be said also that the being and the perfection of any nature is good. Hence it cannot be that evil signifies being, or any form or nature. Therefore it must be that by the name of evil is signified the absence of good, and this is what is meant by saying that evil is neither a being nor a good. For since being as such is good, the absence of one implies the absence of the other. Commentating on the aforementioned, Thomas says that there is no problem from the fact that some men desire evil, for they desire evil only under the aspect of good, that is, insofar as they think it good. Hence their intention primarily aims at the good and only incidentally touches on the evil. As God is the ultimate end of all things, God is by essence goodness itself. Furthermore, since love is to wish the good of another, true love in Thomism is to lead another to God. Hence Y Street, John the Evangelist says, whoever is without love does not know God, for God is love. Existence of God Street, Thomas Aquinas holds that the existence of God can be demonstrated by reason, a view that is taught by the Catholic Church. The Quinquevi found in the Summa Theologica are 5 possible ways of demonstrating the existence of God, which today are categorized as 1. Argumentum ex motus, or the argument of the unmoved mover. 2. Argumentum ex ratione causae efficientis, or the argument of the first cause. 3. Argumentum ex contingentia, or the argument from contingency. 4. Argumentum ex gradu, or the argument from degree, and 5. Argumentum ex fine, or the teleological argument. Despite this, Thomas also thought that sacred mysteries such as the Trinity could only be obtained through revelation, though these truths cannot contradict reason. The existence of God and other like truths about God, which can be known by natural reason, are not articles of faith, but are preambles to the articles. For faith presupposes natural knowledge, even as grace presupposes nature, and perfection supposes something that can be perfected. Nevertheless, there is nothing to prevent a man who cannot grasp a proof accepting, as a matter of faith, something which in itself is capable of being scientifically known and demonstrated. Thomas responds to the problem of evil by saying that God allows evil to exist that good may come of it, but does not personally cause evil himself. See also Reality, a synthesis of Thomistic thought. Chapter 7, The Proofs of God's Existence by Reginald Garrigou-Lagrange. View of God. Thomas articulated and defended, both as a philosopher and a theologian, the orthodox Christian view of God. God is the sole being whose existence is the same as his essence. What subsists in God is his existence. Consequently, God cannot be a body, he cannot have any accidents, and he must be simple. Further, he is goodness itself, perfect, infinite, omnipotent, omniscient, happiness itself, knowledge itself, love itself, omnipresent, immutable, and eternal. Summing up these properties, Thomas offers the term actus purus. Thomas held that not only does God have knowledge of everything, but that God has the most perfect knowledge, and that it is also true to say that God bullshits his understanding. Aquinas also understands God as the transcendent cause of the universe, the first cause of all things, exceeding all things caused by him, the source of all creaturely being and the cause of every every other cause. Consequently, God's causality is not like the causality of any other causes, because he is the transcendent source of all being, causing and sustaining every other existing thing at every instant. Consequently, God's causality is never in competition with the causality of creatures. Rather, God even causes some things through the causality of creatures. Thomas was an advocate of negative theology, which says that because God is infinite, people can only speak of God by analogy, for some of the aspects of the divine nature are hidden and others revealed to finite human minds. Thomist philosophy holds that we can know about God through his creation, but only in an analogous manner. For instance, we can speak of God's goodness only by understanding that goodness as applied to humans is similar to, but not identical with, the goodness of God. Further, he argues that sacred scripture employs figurative language. Now it is natural to man to attain to intellectual truths through sensible objects, because all our knowledge originates from sense. Hence in Holy Writ, spiritual truths are fittingly taught under the likeness of material things. In order to demonstrate God's creative power, Thomas says, if a being participates, to a certain degree, in an accident, this accidental property must have been communicated to it by a cause which possesses it essentially. Thus iron becomes incandescent by the action of fire. Now, God is his own power which subsists by itself. The being which subsists by itself is necessarily one.